Hi everyone, I'm Chloe and welcome to Mentors Connect. Before we get started with today's podcast episode, make sure to smash the like button, drop a subscribe, and now let's meet today's mentor. Today we have Michael Chrisment on, so let's give a little round of applause. Ooh, and he's doing amazing things in a lot of different areas. So he's working in blockchain technologies and business, in like climate change and supply chains, and it's really cool stuff. And as I said before, we're going to be talking to Michael today all about everything he does, his future aspirations. But as I said before, I'm not going to ramble on too much. So thank you, Michael, again so much for coming onto the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Good day, like you guys say in Australia, even though I'm in Switzerland, so it's a little bit far away on the other side of the world.
No, that's so cool you're in Switzerland though, which I think is amazing. But I wanted to get started. So to give everyone also a bit more insight into Michael's background, he's worked in many major worldwide companies, working in many amazing positions, CEO, COO, super cool career. And what I'm interested in, you've really taken, I've noticed, positions in leadership and in business. And my question is, were you as a young person, as a child, interested in business and being a leader one day?
Yeah, I think I've always been someone with a strong vision, and therefore knowing where you want to go or what you want to do, you kind of lead or you bring people with you. So I've been a leader, I've been a visionary, I've been pushing, and I like movement and I like to build. So as a kid, I was always and pretty often the driving force.
No, that's amazing. So you always took lots of initiative, as you said, were the driving force. And I'm curious is you being that type of young person, which is really amazing, would you say you had a role model or someone in your life who really inspired you to be like that, to be a driving force, to be a visionary?
Yeah, I mean, I think very close to me, I had my father who was sort of a serial entrepreneur. So he was raised and born in a very, very small country in the middle of nowhere in France with like 300 inhabitants and ended up,
300,
driving
that's
in.
small.
That's very small, and he ended up, building small companies and then mid-sized companies and then running bigger companies. So I was pretty inspired by his path. On the other side, I was also a bit of a dreamer, so I was also inspired by business people with always a touch of an arty touch. So the ones that I really could rely on is Walt Disney. So I think this guy was pretty inspiring to me in many ways because he was sort of a dreaming his life, but still building a very sizable and effective business, as you can see even these years, even if the guy is still not around, his franchise is still living and breathing pretty hardly. And from a marketing standpoint, also, it's a very interesting move has been done on making the most out of assets you have in the Walt Disney Company from a business standpoint. So there was an inspiration. So a lot of people with, business background with sort of a creative inspiration, visionary, arty touch was were always very inspiring to me.
So I'm guessing, having a bit more insight about your background, that you were always a driving force as a young person, that you probably envisioned yourself to be a leader in as an adult in business and really driving that and being a visionary.
Yeah, I don't know to what extent I ended up thinking, that I would lead teams, but what I knew is that I wanted to build stuff. So whether you do it on your own, you create your own company, but you can be as much of a builder, an entrepreneur inside existing companies, and I've done that several times. So when I joined Kraft Foods or when I joined Nestle, it was both job creation. So you start on a blank sheet of paper and then you drive and you build and you recruit and then, you influence. Sometimes you even evangelize because these are lands, that are new or areas that are totally new to people. So I like that. I like doing this, and yeah, it's probably a message to you guys, young guys, that it's great to be an entrepreneur. You can do it on your own. You can also do it within a frame, and this is what artists are doing. They are in a frame, but they are still creative within a frame.
Mm.
So creativity within a framework is something that I've learned from one of my mentor, and it's a fantastic concept because you feel that when you have a frame, you're limited, but actually you're not. You can still do a lot.
No, that's really, really good advice, and I think something really important. And now I wanted to continue on. So we've talked a bit about your early childhood and being a young person. Now I want to hear about what did you study at university to feed this, desire to perhaps become an entrepreneur and be a driver for, something bigger.
Yeah, actually, I wanted to be a doctor, so nothing to do with everything that we've talked
Yeah.
about. But I felt, that was very humane, and you could still, yeah. So I wanted to do that. So I started to that. I failed miserably because I think, my passion for technology on the side, having my first computer at 6, ended up taking it over. And it was exactly at the time, where the internet was booming and it was starting coding. And so, it was not really working with medical school and having to focus on something specific. So,
It's like I want to do
uh,
coding on the side.
exactly. But I ended up getting married with a doctor. So in a way, I fulfilled my dream through her. But so I didn't do that. But then I went into marketing. So I studied math and science, and then moved into having a master in digital marketing. And then I started to work and starting in the advertising industry. And then I complemented that, which I think was good with a master later on when I was an executive. So as executive schooling at HEC, so one of the leading schools in France and in the world. Um, and that was good. That was good. I felt like I would, if I had continued studying too long and too old, I would have missed, those early years of learning and practicing and trying, and then going back maybe to studies, which I did after an executive, which was tough because then, you're older, your brain is not exactly structured the same way. You have a family. I had a 1-year-old kid, so it was tough. But I ended up, you confronting different views also in different people. So that was the scholarship, let's say, part.
So I want to actually hop in a bit more. So you mentioned how you ended up deciding, like looking more into marketing in your education. So can you tell us a bit about your experience in careers in the marketing space?
So yeah, sure. What I love doing my study in marketing is that it was digital marketing, but this was 23 years ago.
So it's way ahead of
So
times, like really.
so digital 23 years ago was like, everyone thought it was a fad, right? Everyone thought, yeah, the internet's for geeks and nerds and nothing's gonna happen. Which pretty much the same debate these days is Web3 and Metaverse and
Mm,
blockchain. Everyone's kind of like, yeah, okay, thank you, nerds and geeks, and it's gonna go away, but it won't. So that was interesting to do that. What was very interesting is that we didn't know what could happen. So it was a mix of academic and then try and error and do projects and work. And I created my first company at that time because we were, you know, students and people needed to build websites and CDs and DVDs and things like that. So we had to create a company on the side to help people do that. So we were doing a lot of things ourselves beyond the academic. So I would encourage people also not to do 100% academic, but also, try out do things on the side themselves. So that was really the start of that, and then I entered advertising, and that industry needed to leverage an entire new channel and an entire new universe of possibilities. It was actually a long tail. Before you had like 3 TV channels, and then all of a sudden you ended up having 500 TV channels because YouTube becomes, something so massive that you need to develop a sort of a long tail content in different versions and lengths and shapes and forms. And that was really, a huge disruption. So I really liked those 10 years in advertising because, again, it was new, everything had to be built, and then clients were looking at us as inventors. So I really liked that. Then I moved into the other side. So my friends in the agency, they said, you're moving to the dark side, because I went to client side, because then the clients had, after doing the trial and error and test, they wanted to structure themselves because this was not a fad. Hey, surprise. And they needed to structure themselves. And so I ended up moving at Kraft Foods and then structuring digital, social, e-commerce, CRM for the entire Europe region across the 5 categories of products. And this is where I started to fall in love with fast-moving consumer goods, because again, this wasn't a day-to-day. These are products you touch every day, and it's very close to the behaviors of the people and their aspiration, their daily aspirations. So I was doing what I loved, which was specific to marketing and digital, in the context of something that was moving fast. So you can imagine job creation, moving fast, specialize in an area that you like. So it was exactly ticking all the boxes for me. But I was preaching people and evangelizing. This is a word I never managed to say. People that have been doing the same thing for the past 50 years. No one has ever been fired for running a TV campaign. And now these days you had to tell them, well, you're going to take 20% of your budget and you're going to shift all that stuff towards digital marketing, websites, CRM programs, social media is starting, with the Facebooks and the likes. And you're going to invest in content, and you're going to have to talk to much more people, much more diverse. You're going to need to personalize, you're going to need to version. They were looking at me like, okay, well, no, we're not going to do that. It's going to be too complicated. So it was very interesting to kind of go and evangelize and influence. I really liked that, to make a shift, and also to sort of push for my job not to exist anymore after a couple of years. Because this is, in those type of roles, this is what you're trying to do. You're trying to make yourself useless. Because at the end of the day, this is not about you. This is about the practice that needs to be integrated within the business units at the core of the business, so that they take it at the core of the business, and then they don't need a specialist or a consultant to run it, right? So that was really fascinating, to be so close to the core of the business, to the strategy, and try and influence and drive change.
You
Really
were like
love that.
part of it all. Like you said, you like got in initially 23 years ago, so you were like really ahead of the game. And as you said, you were in it when it was all a fad. So I think that's something super interesting.
It was the early days, indeed.
So now I want to talk a bit about your career, like after now moving a bit away from marketing, still related to that, but I want to talk most recently about your achievements in your previous role as the CEO of Pharma Connect. And I actually want to tell everyone something super cool. And I actually mainly came across Michael because he was the CEO of Pharma Connect, which is a super amazing company, which of course we'll be talking about right now with Michael. But what Michael did, which is amazing, he started a fund, and he funded $9 million for the company. And that is amazing. That was the Series A. So that's initial funding. And to be able to get $9 million in initial funding is an amazing achievement. And I think that's why I was really, really passionate. I was like, Michael, please get on the podcast so we can talk about this. But I want to talk now to Michael about how he got into Farmer Connect. So actually getting started, what did you do at Farmer Connect? What was Farmer Connect, and how did you become CEO?
So there are many questions.
Sorry, take your time. Just throwing them at you.
So where did it start? Well, it always starts with a passion for something. So I was ending a job at a company called Combini, which was in the media, a pure player dedicated to millennials. So I spent 3 years at Combini. For you guys, it's comparable to Vice, for example. I'm quite sure you know Vice. So a company that builds and publish content for the youth. So exactly, millennials, Gen Z, you guys. I was lost in translation for about 3 years, even though I know a bit what's cooking and what's cool. I was lost in translation in that company for 3 years because average age of people, employees at Combini was 25. I was learning every day. I was amazed by, I was bringing obviously my expertise and experience in marketing and being the CMO. But that opened my eyes in terms of the deep aspiration of the youth and what was the driver. So after, doing advertising and then moving client side and then going into a pure player in the media, I was having a pretty good understanding of what it means to build brands and to build services with those three different angles, plus the layer of youth aspiration. And then comes that opportunity to work at Pharma Connect, which for me was a thought of a, match in heaven. So you've got like heavy tech stuff on the side because this is heavy tech stuff. This is blockchain, this is traceability, this is supply chain, this is, a huge industry starting with coffee and cocoa. And this is very tangible stuff, right? This is farmers, this is coffee beans and cocoa beans and tablets of chocolates and little cafe lattes and espressos, and this is very tangible. So you've got like something in zero and ones, and you've got something that is very concrete and has been there forever. So and on top of it, you've got a purpose, right? So when you're starting to get old like me, you're married, you have 2 kids, and you're 43, you have your midlife crisis, and you're having kind of like, sure, what impact I'm having, what sort of legacy I'm going to have. And that was very interesting to match this passion for technology, passion for brands and fast-moving consumer goods with the purpose, which at Pharma Connect is to humanize consumption through technology. And I've been fighting crazy to get that job because I felt like, this is fabulous, but I'm dreaming about nothing than this. So I finally got the job, and then the guys had started, the work for funding our Series A. So I entered right at that moment. And just to correct exactly, we were seeded before by guys from the industry. Which is great. And we were looking for an additional acceleration, and they were bringing me to drive that, to close this, and to drive growth in the product, in the commercial setup, and in the growth of the company. So I entered this phase, and then yes, we go straight into both looking at the product and then thinking, okay, the product is key, right? That's the number thing you need to do is to have a solid product. But then on the parallel, you see there's a lot of potential, and there's a lot of interest from the industry on what you're building. So let's go for additional funding, because then you can accelerate. So then we went there and we decided to go for the industry. And no banks, no VCs really focus on the industry, and we've been driving that and landed. After 6 months, I joined a beautiful Series A of, like you said, 9 million US dollars, which was a great achievement. Even though, it's not only about money, it's more about people
But what that
make
goes
business.
towards too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No, that's
So that was really a great achievement.
that's so amazing. Obviously, now you've moved on to greater things. So what I want to discuss is a bit of what maybe you see for yourself now, past your previous role as CEO at Farmer Connect.
Yes, well, was it what I want is to continue in technology, and I believe technology can be a force for good. And people need to be convinced of that. And it's not early days in many technologies. I hear a lot of companies going for proof of concept, pilots, and it's not fast enough. So for many challenges that we currently have, specifically in social and societal, environmental, technology is a fantastic enabler, if not accelerator, of change, of positive change. If I take the example of Pharma Connect, you can't have an impact at the origin, and I mean a measurable impact without technology. You need technology in order to have a measurable and quicker impact, and you can have it at scale because it's now pretty much shared and accessible. So I want to be an actor of that change. I want to leverage technology as a force for good. That's really the area where I'm looking forward to continue to develop. Yeah. And there's another aspect which I talked at the beginning, which is the art space. So I'm also a co-founder of an art gallery, which is here in my town, where we bring local artists to share and to create. I want to stay close to that sphere as well. I believe culture, I believe arts as are key in this world. And for people sake and mental health, and I think we should protect this, even though there's not always an immediate business results and business impact and business model, but I think it's deeply needed for us to stay sane.
No,
And
definitely.
working as a society. So these are areas which I'm really passionate about.
No, that's so amazing. And so that actually makes a lot of sense now because you're kind of talking about an artist, even in his frame, can still be creative. So I now see the little arty hints of, your interest and passion for that. But now I actually, just like as a bit of a final question before we wrap up today's podcast, I wanted to talk to you a bit about, obviously you've been really, in the realm of business and the shift towards more social good. You mentioned before how when you were at Kimben,
Combini.
Combini, that's it. When you're at Combini, you're working with lots of young people, and through that, you really got a view for the youth. And I think, we've particularly seen millennials and Gen Zers really push for this new change of business. So, what's your opinions on now, businesses and people, wanting more from businesses, wanting different outcomes? Could you give us a bit of insight on that?
Yeah, I think it's very important to realize that you need to create shared value. And this is an expression that I've learned at Nestle and that Nestle use a lot. And I'm not going to reference Nestle specifically as a good implementer of that concept, but I like the concept. And I think with their scale, if they realize this across their business, this is fantastic. This is deeply impactful. This is the number one food company in the world. I mean, they have 120 billion turnover
Massive.
with more than 300,000 employees. So I think for you guys, creating shared value is very important. You know, just looking at things from your angle and perspective and trying to make a difference on your side is not enough, right? It's much harder to deliver something together, uh, but it's much more meaningful and impactful, right? Uh, there's an African saying that everyone's using all the time that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Um, so if you apply that, of course you need to go fast. So I always said, you know, in startups, and I was saying this to my shareholders, and it was always a debate, but I was telling them, you know, we're doing both a sprint and a marathon. And they were telling me, well, you know, Michael, you can't sprint and marathon. I said, indeed, but that's what we have to do, right? We have to run fast a long time because, you know, turnover and break even, average break even in technology is between 5 to 7 years. So even though you're raising funds, you're still going to cost your shareholders a lot of money before you break even. But eventually, when you break even, the margins are high and it's going to be a good payoff. But yes, so don't go on your own. Create shared value, and drive for impact. Yeah, drive for real impact, not your own little kind of self-esteem, you know, PRable impact. Meaningful and tangible, measurable impact. And if it's shared, then this is exponential. When it's shared, it's exponential. It's, yeah, that's fantastic.
That's a really nice way, I think, to end the podcast episode. I think that's a really good message. Thank you so much, Michael, yet again
Thank
for
you.
coming onto the podcast. And thank you everyone for watching and listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and gained a lot of value from it. And yet again, make sure to share this with all your friends, subscribe to the YouTube channel, to the Spotify, tell your teachers you like it. And thank you everyone once again. Thank you, Michael, once again. And hopefully we see you all on our next episode.
Thank you for having me.